Hey runners, Coach Elizabeth here. Today I'm going to be talking about the different nutrition strategies for when you're training and racing. They should be different, you have different outcomes, so I'm going to dive into the details here. So I must get 1,001 questions about how to properly fuel and hydrate for your racing and training. Now, do you train fasted? Do you do carbs? Do you do fats? Do you use gels? Do you use powders or pills? All the questions, thousands and thousands. The point that I want to make sure that you take away today is that you should have a different strategy for when you're training and when you're racing. The outcomes are different. One, you're building adaptations, you're building strength. The other is strictly for performance. So while it's important to practice your race day fueling and hydration, it's not something that you need to be using all the time. Let's go into kind of the fuel and then the hydration and then how to combine it all together. All right, so during endurance events, your body uses two types of fuel, carbohydrates and fats. Uses them in varying degrees depending on the type and duration of the event. So if it's a shorter, higher intensity session, you're using primarily carbohydrates. If it's lower intensity and kind of longer in duration, a combination of carbohydrates and fats. And the degree to which you use those really depends on your level of fitness and your basic physiology. So no two runners are going to be using the same amount of fats or carbohydrates or ratios. So it's really important that you learn and adjust accordingly for how your body works best. Now in training, especially base training, this is the time when you can kind of be relying more on whole foods, when you can try out that fasted, doing some of those sessions fasted. It's when you may or may not even need to fuel. Sessions 90 minutes or less, most people, most bodies, especially if you've been eating right the rest of the time and hydrating properly, you won't need to fuel during that session. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people go out for that, 45-minute run or even like a recovery jog, and they're taking a gel before, they're having a gel during. Your body doesn't need all of those things. And if you are doing a slower or a recovery effort, you might be able to rely on whole foods. So whether that's a banana, whether that's a picky bar, or dried fruit, nuts even. I've seen people use Pop-Tarts. I'm not going to say whether you can one way or the other. It's entirely up to you. But more of those whole foods in training. Your body's going slower. You have more of that capability to digest your food as you're going along. When you're doing your race fueling as opposed to training fueling, performance is key, right? You're out there because you want to have your best time. You want to be able to give it everything you've got. So carbohydrates are king when it comes to racing. Make sure that you're consuming carbohydrates, a mix of glucose and fructose. That's been studied and shown for better absorption, getting better results. You also want to make sure that you are doing those easily accessible carbohydrates. So this is when either a gel or a chew or, maybe that UCAN bar, if you can digest it in tinier, smaller bites, this is when you want to be using those maybe not whole food, kind of engineered sports products. You want to make sure that you practice that race fueling beforehand, but this is the time to use those, not necessarily in your training. The message that you've heard me say time and again when it comes to hydration for either training or racing, all day, every day, before, during, and after. Hydration is important at all times. You can adjust your hydration maybe based on the intensity, based on the heat, and kind of based on the session specifically, but more often than not, your hydration demands will stay pretty consistent. So if you are training or racing longer distances, anything over 60 minutes, you want to make sure that you're hydrating properly with an electrolyte beverage, and then doing water throughout the day, and then maybe water or a hydration beverage before bed so that you're ready and rehydrated for the session the next day. The final area or element of kind of training and racing nutrition are those added on kind of performance boosters or supplements. That can be caffeine, nitrates, so the beetroot juice, That can be BCAAs, that can be added protein. These, I kind of put these in a separate category that you want to use sparingly and kind of according to your judgment. Some people do not go a day without that cup of coffee or tea. So caffeine might be a part of your daily activity, but it's something that you shouldn't necessarily be using to enhance sessions on a daily basis. It's something that you might want to save for race day, practicing beforehand to see how you do, but these kind of optional add-ons are something that you shouldn't rely on in your training in order to have a good performance. So be selective with when you're using them, test them out. Don't go and, try nitrate or beetroot powder on race day. But they're definitely some proven performance enhancers, so something to include on race day to give you that extra added edge. Now, to summarize all of this, finding the right strategy is completely and highly individual. You want to be experimenting with different foods at different phases during your training schedule. I have a video on periodized nutrition, 2 of them actually, check those out. But you want to know that what you're doing in training doesn't necessarily translate to what you're doing in racing, and you could have and should have different strategies on a daily basis and for different types of training. So practice your race day nutrition. But remember, in training, you can rely more on whole foods, but in racing, you want to make sure that you're getting those carbohydrates. That is king to performance, and you're taking them in regularly and consistently. Back to you after that brief interruption. Forgot what I was going to say. If you like this video, be sure and click that like button. Leave me a comment if you have any questions or how you change up your nutrition strategy in training versus racing. Also subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of our videos, and we have a free bonus gift for you. There's a link in the description down below. I've created a kind of quick start nutrition guide, so if you have any questions, it's a really good place to start. Click on the link, leave us your name and email, and we'll get that right out to you. All right, see you in the next one.